The rope felt coarse against Luna Blackwood's throat as she stood on the makeshift gallows, her wrists bound behind her back with iron shackles that burned against her supernatural skin. The October wind whipped through Salem's town square, carrying the acrid scent of fear and hatred from the crowd below. But beneath their human stench, Luna could smell something else, something that made her wolf senses recoil. Betrayal. It reeked of pine and wet earth, familiar as her own heartbeat. Luna Blackwood, Magistrate Cornelius Hale's voice cut through the jeering crowd like a blade. You stand accused of practicing the dark arts, consorting with demons, and bringing evil upon this godly town. How do you answer? Luna lifted her chin, her emerald eyes scanning the sea of faces that had once smiled at her in the marketplace. Now they twisted with religious fervor and mob mentality. These people had bought her herbs, sought her healing touch when their children burned with fever, whispered their secrets to her in the dark of night. Now they screamed for her blood. I answer that you know nothing of true darkness, she said, her voice carrying despite the wind. But you will. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Witch," and others took up the cry, their voices rising like the howl of a rabid pack. If only they knew. Luna was no witch. She was something far more ancient, far more dangerous. She was the first female alpha born in 3 centuries, a secret that had kept her hidden among humans while her mate Marcus led their pack from the shadows of the surrounding forest. The irony wasn't lost on her that they accused her of consorting with demons when she was, in fact, something they would consider far worse. She was their natural predator. Her enhanced hearing picked up movement in the tree-line beyond the crowd. Marcus. Even from this distance, she could feel his anguish like claws raking across her soul through their mate bond. The urge to call out to him, to let him know she felt his presence, nearly overwhelmed her. But that would only bring death to them both. The livestock, Minister Blackthorn's nasal voice pierced her thoughts as he stepped forward, his black robes billowing. 7 sheep, 4 cattle, all found with their throats torn out. And the Hendricks child. The child recovered, Luna interrupted sharply. My herbs saved her life when your prayers failed. Witchcraft, someone shouted from the crowd. The devil's work, cried another. Blackthorn raised his hand for silence. The child spoke of wolves, Goodwife Blackwood. Wolves with human eyes. She drew pictures of them in the dirt, wolves walking on 2 legs like men. Luna's blood chilled. Little Mary Hendricks had seen them. During the fever dreams, the child must have glimpsed through the veil between worlds, witnessed what she should never have seen. Luna had thought the girl's ramblings were just delirium. She had been wrong. Children speak nonsense when fevered, Luna said, but she could hear the slight tremor in her own voice. You would hang a woman based on a child's fever dreams? We would hang a woman who consorts with unholy beasts, Magistrate Hale declared. Who leads a pack of demons disguised as wolves to prey upon our livestock and threaten our children. The crowd roared approval, but Luna barely heard them. Her wolf senses had caught something else, a scent that made her stomach clench with dread. Among the human smells of sweat and fear and religious zeal, she detected the familiar musk of her own kind. One of her pack was here. In the crowd. Watching her condemnation. Her eyes swept the faces more carefully now, looking beyond the obvious hatred to search for the telltale signs, the 2 bright eyes, the way they held themselves apart from the purely human crowd, the slight restlessness that came from being in human form during daylight hours. There. Near the back, partially hidden behind a merchant and his wife. Silas Grimm. Her beta. Marcus's most trusted friend. The wolf who had stood at their mating ceremony and sworn blood loyalty to their pack. Their eyes met across the crowd, and Luna saw something that froze her very soul. There was no anguish in his gaze, no desperate plan for rescue. There was satisfaction. Cold, calculating satisfaction. Understanding hit her like a physical blow. The livestock killings, they hadn't been random attacks by rogues as they'd assumed. They'd been deliberate, performed with surgical precision to mimic werewolf kills while being crude enough for humans to discover. The timing of Mary Hendricks' illness, bringing Luna into town when she was usually safely hidden in the forest. the witch hunters arriving in Salem just days before the accusations began. Silas had orchestrated it all. But why? As if reading her thoughts, Silas smiled, a cold, predatory expression that never reached his eyes. Then he tilted his head slightly toward Minister Blackthorne, and Luna caught the subtle gesture that passed between them. The minister was in on it. A human, working with her own beta to destroy her. Magistrate Hale, Blackthorne said, his voice carrying the authority of a man who spoke regularly with God, I have here testimony from a God-fearing citizen who witnessed this woman's transformation into beast form. He produced a parchment from his robes, unrolling it with theatrical precision. This witness, fearing for his immortal soul should he remain silent, came forward to tell us what he observed 3 nights past. Luna's enhanced hearing caught the lie in his words, the slight elevation of heartbeat that betrayed deception. But the crowd heard only righteous authority. Read it, someone called out. Let us hear the testimony, shouted another. Blackthorne cleared his throat. I did witness the accused, Luna Blackwood, remove her clothing beneath the full moon and transform into a great gray wolf with eyes like green fire. She did run with a pack of similar beasts, leading them to the Hendricks farm where they did slaughter livestock. When she returned to human form, she did speak words in an unknown tongue that chilled my very soul. The crowd erupted. Some women fainted. Men crossed themselves and muttered prayers. Children hid behind their mothers' skirts. Luna felt sick. Every detail was accurate except for one crucial element. No human could have witnessed such a thing and lived. Their pack laws were absolute about that. Which meant either the witness was supernatural himself, or he was a werewolf who had observed from close enough range to know exactly what to report. Her gaze found Silas again, and this time his smile was openly triumphant. You speak of unknown tongues, Luna called out, her voice carrying over the crowd's hysteria. Tell me, Minister Blackthorne, what words did your mysterious witness claim to hear? Blackthorne's eyes flickered with uncertainty. Words of dark summoning. Summoning what? Evil. Dark forces. Luna laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. If I could summon dark forces, Minister, would I be standing here in chains? Would I not have called upon demons to strike you all dead where you stand? Perhaps your dark master has abandoned you, he replied, but sweat beaded on his forehead. Or perhaps, Luna said, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow reached every ear, your witness lied because he serves a master darker than any you can imagine. Her eyes locked with Silas's again, and she saw his hand move subtly toward the knife at his belt. Even in human form, his instincts recognized the challenge in her words. The accused seeks to cast doubt upon righteous testimony, Magistrate Hale declared. The time for words has passed. Luna Blackwood, you have been found guilty of witchcraft, consorting with demons, and threatening the godly citizens of Salem. The sentence is death by hanging. The crowd cheered, but Luna heard something else beneath their voices, a sound that made her heart race with desperate hope and terrible fear. Howling. Distant but growing closer. Marcus was coming. The pack was coming. No, she whispered, knowing her supernatural hearing would carry the word to them across the miles. Stay away. But it was too late. She could smell them now, dozens of her wolves racing through the forest toward Salem. They would arrive within minutes, and when they did, they would walk into whatever traps Silas had prepared. Because that's what this was, not just her execution, but the destruction of everything she loved. Place the noose, Hale ordered. The executioner, a broad man with hands like ham hocks, stepped forward with the rope. Up close, Luna could smell the silver dust that had been worked into the hemp fibers. Even if she survived the initial hanging, the silver would poison her supernatural healing, ensuring her death. They had thought of everything. As the rope settled around her neck, Luna closed her eyes and reached deep within herself, to the place where her wolf's soul resided. She had hidden her true nature for 23 years, living quietly among humans while protecting her pack from discovery. That time was over. When she opened her eyes again, they blazed with golden fire, not the green of her human form, but the ancient amber of the first wolves, the color that marked true alphas. I call upon the old laws, she said, her voice carrying supernatural authority that made every person in the square step backward despite themselves. I call upon blood and bone, moon and star. I call upon the covenant written in fang and claw. Blasphemy. Blackthorn screamed. Hang her. Hang her now. The executioner's hand moved toward the lever that would open the trapdoor beneath her feet. But Luna wasn't finished. Silas Grimm, she called out, her voice booming with alpha power. I know you hear me. I know you smell my blood on the wind. You have broken the sacred laws of pack and mate bond. You have betrayed your alpha to humans and silver. In the crowd, Silas had gone perfectly still. By right of alpha blood, by right of betrayal witnessed, I claim the old justice, Luna continued, her eyes now blazing so brightly that some in the crowd shielded their faces. My blood calls to my blood. My pack calls to my pack. And my spirit. She drew in a deep breath, tasting the fear in the air, the silver in the rope, the approaching scent of her beloved wolves racing to their doom. My spirit will not rest until justice is done. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Even the humans could feel the weight of them, the supernatural binding that locked into place around Luna's declaration. Now, Magistrate Hale ordered, his voice shaking. The executioner pulled the lever. Luna fell. The rope snapped tight with a sound like thunder, and her neck broke with an audible crack that silenced the cheering crowd. But as her body swayed gently in the October wind, Luna's eyes remained open, and they still burned with golden fire. In the distance, the howling of wolves rose to a crescendo of anguish that chilled every human heart in Salem. And in the crowd, Silas Grimm smiled as he melted away into the chaos, his work complete. Or so he thought. Chapter 2. The world went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from absence of sound, but something deeper, a profound stillness that seemed to separate Luna from the screaming crowd, the creaking rope, even from the October wind that had been whipping around the gallows moments before. She felt herself falling, not down but inward, as if the very essence of who she was had begun to slip away from the broken shell of her body. Her last sight through human eyes was Silas, still wearing that satisfied smile as he watched her corpse sway in the afternoon light. Then darkness claimed her. But death, Luna discovered, was not what the priests had promised. She opened her eyes, or thought she did, to find herself standing beside the gallows, looking up at her own lifeless form. The body hanging there was undeniably hers, the dark hair now matted with sweat, the face pale and still, the green eyes that had blazed with alpha fire now closed and peaceful. The rope had done its work, her neck sat at an unnatural angle that would have made even the most experienced executioner proud of his craft. The crowd roared its approval, but their voices sounded distant, muffled, as if she were hearing them from underwater. Justice is served. Magistrate Hale declared, raising his hands to quiet the celebration. Let this be a warning to all who would practice the dark arts in our godly town. Luna tried to speak, to scream that she could see them, that she was still here, but no sound emerged. She looked down at herself and gasped, or tried to. Her form was translucent, shimmering like moonlight on water. She could see through her own hands to the packed earth beneath the gallows. What am I? Before she could process the strangeness of her situation, a sound split the air that froze every human heart in Salem. It started low, a rumbling growl that seemed to emanate from the forest itself, then rose to a howl of pure anguish that spoke of loss so profound it could shatter souls. Marcus. Luna spun toward the tree-line, her spirit form moving with thought rather than physical effort. She could see him there, barely visible among the shadows, a massive gray wolf with eyes like liquid amber, his great head thrown back as he voiced his grief to the afternoon sky. The sound of it tore through her ethereal heart like silver claws. But Marcus wasn't alone. As his howl faded, others took up the cry. Elena's lighter voice, David's deep bass, young Thomas whose voice still cracked between his human and wolf forms. One by one, every member of their pack added their voices to the lament until the forest rang with supernatural mourning. The humans in the square covered their ears, some falling to their knees as the otherworldly sound washed over them. Luna saw Minister Blackthorn's face go white with terror, his lips moving in silent prayer. Demons, someone whispered. They come for their mistress, said another. But Luna barely heard them. She was trying desperately to reach Marcus, to let him know she was still here, still fighting. She stretched out her hand toward the forest, concentrating with every fiber of her being. Marcus, I'm here. Can you feel me? For a moment, just a moment, his massive head turned in her direction. His amber eyes seemed to look directly at her, and hope flared in Luna's chest. But then his gaze moved on, searching, and she realized he was looking for threats, not spirits. He couldn't see her. Couldn't sense her through their mate bond. The howling ceased as abruptly as it had begun, leaving behind a silence that felt more ominous than the morning had. Luna could smell fear rising from the crowd like smoke from a fire, primal, animal fear that spoke to the deepest parts of their human brains, the parts that remembered when wolves were the apex predators and humans were merely prey. Cut her down, Magistrate Hale ordered, his voice shakier than he probably intended. Prepare the pyre. We burn the body before sunset. No. Luna screamed, but again no sound emerged. She watched in horror as the executioner began untying the rope that held her corpse. Her body, her vessel, her anchor to the physical world, was about to be destroyed. Think, Luna. You're Alpha. You've always been Alpha. There has to be something. She closed her eyes, could spirits close their eyes, and reached deep within herself, searching for the connection to her pack, to Marcus, to the supernatural forces that had shaped her from birth. The golden fire that had blazed in her eyes on the gallows, the power that had let her speak the binding words of the old laws, it had to still be there somewhere. When she opened her eyes again, the world looked different. She could see the threads now, gossamer strands of silver light that connected every living thing in Salem. They pulsed with life energy, some bright and strong, others dim and flickering. The humans had thin, pale threads that barely glowed. But extending from the forest came thick cords of brilliant gold and silver, each one leading back to a member of her pack. And there, blazing like a beacon in the growing dusk, was her connection to Marcus, a rope of pure light that still bound them together even in death. Not death, she realized with sudden, startling clarity. Something else. She followed the golden cord with her consciousness, letting it pull her spirit form away from the gallows and toward the forest. Movement in this form was like flying in dreams. She simply willed herself forward and found herself racing through the trees faster than any living wolf could run. Marcus was perhaps 2 miles from town, standing in a clearing where the pack had gathered. Luna counted 23 wolves in various forms, some fully shifted, others in the painful between state that allowed for human speech but kept their enhanced senses and strength. All of them looked to Marcus for guidance, for answers, for leadership in this moment of crisis. But Marcus stood frozen, his great head bowed, his amber eyes dim with grief. The Alpha who had led them for 15 years, who had never shown weakness or uncertainty, looked utterly lost. Marcus, Elena called out, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. In her half-shifted form, she looked more predator than woman, elongated limbs, claws instead of fingernails, teeth that were too sharp for human speech. We have to strike back. We can't let them. She's gone. Marcus's voice was barely above a whisper, but every wolf in the clearing heard it. Our Alpha is gone. The mate bond is empty. Luna's spirit form trembled with the need to comfort him, to let him know she was there, watching, fighting to find her way back to him. She reached out with her consciousness, trying to touch that golden thread that connected them. The moment her ethereal fingers made contact with the cord, Marcus's head snapped up. Did you feel that? He asked, his voice suddenly sharp. Elena's nostrils flared as she scented the air. Feel what? I thought, for a moment. Marcus shook his massive head. Nothing. Grief plays tricks on the mind. But Luna had felt the connection strengthen. She could sense his emotions now, the crushing weight of loss, the fury that burned beneath his grief, the desperate need to make someone pay for what had been done to her. She could also sense something else, something that made her spirit form go cold with dread. Through Marcus's enhanced senses, she could smell silver. Lots of it. And not the trace amounts that had been in the rope around her neck. This was the heavy, acrid stench of silver weapons, silver shot, silver-lined traps. Someone had prepared for this moment. Someone had known the pack would come seeking vengeance and had laid an ambush. Silas. Marcus, no, Luna whispered, knowing he couldn't hear her but trying anyway. It's a trap. But Marcus was already moving, his grief transforming into the cold, calculating fury of an alpha protecting his pack. Elena, take 5 wolves and circle around to the north side of town. David, you and your scouts approach from the south. I want every human who participated in this abomination to. A branch snapped in the underbrush to their east. Every wolf in the clearing froze, ears pricked, nostrils flaring. Luna felt their tension like a physical presence, the collective alertness of supernatural predators who sensed danger but couldn't quite locate it. We're not alone, Elena growled, her claws extending further. Marcus raised his head, testing the wind. His eyes narrowed. Silver, he said quietly. And Silas. The beta emerged from the tree-line as if summoned by his name, but something was wrong with his scent. Luna could smell it even in her spirit form, the acrid tang of silver dust, the bitter chemical smell of human weapons, and underneath it all, the cold scent of betrayal made manifest. Silas, Marcus said, relief flooding his voice. Thank the moon. I thought we'd lost you too when Luna. You did lose me, Silas interrupted, his voice carrying none of the grief that marked every other wolf in the clearing. You lost me the moment you accepted a female as your alpha. The temperature in the clearing seemed to drop 10 degrees. Luna watched in horror as Silas smiled, the same cold, satisfied expression he'd worn at her execution. 3 centuries of tradition, Silas continued, beginning to pace around the edge of the clearing like a predator circling prey. 3 centuries of proper pack hierarchy, with males leading as nature intended. And you threw it all away for what? Love? Marcus's form began to blur as fury overtook him, his human shape struggling to contain the wolf that wanted to tear Silas apart. Luna was alpha-born. The old bloodlines chose her. The old bloodlines chose wrong. Silas stopped pacing, his eyes now glowing with their own inner fire, but not the golden amber of pack wolves. These eyes burned silver, cold and unnatural. Which is why I had to choose correctly for all of us. You, Elena snarled, pieces falling into place. You betrayed her to the humans. I saved us all from the abomination of female leadership, Silas corrected. And now, with Luna gone, the pack can return to proper order. Under proper leadership. He gestured toward the trees, and Luna's spirit form went cold with terror as shapes emerged from the shadows. Men in dark clothing, carrying muskets and crossbows, their weapons glinting with silver in the fading light. But they moved wrong, too fluid, too predatory for humans. Hunters, Marcus breathed. Supernatural hunters, Silas corrected. Vampires, mostly, with a few demons for variety. They have no love for werewolves, but they understand the natural order of things. Males lead. Females follow. It's the way of all predator species. Luna counted at least 30 figures surrounding the clearing, all armed with silver weapons. Her pack was outnumbered, outgunned, and caught completely off guard. You've doomed us all, Elena whispered. I've freed us all, Silas replied. Luna's death was just the beginning. With the old alpha bloodline extinct, I can rebuild this pack the way it should be, strong, unified, properly led. The bloodline isn't extinct, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. I still live. Silas laughed. You were never alpha-born, Marcus. You gained your position through Luna's blood, her power. With her gone, you're just another wolf. Strong, yes, but not supernatural royalty. That was when Luna realized the true scope of Silas's plan. He hadn't just wanted her dead, he'd wanted to destroy the very concept of alpha bloodlines, to remake the supernatural world according to his own vision of proper hierarchy. And he was about to succeed. The silver-armed hunters were closing in, their weapons trained on wolves who had no idea they were about to die. Marcus and the others were still focused on Silas, not understanding that the real threat surrounded them on all sides. Luna reached out desperately toward Marcus, trying to warn him through their bond. But her ethereal hands passed through the golden cord without effect, her consciousness too disconnected from the physical world to make contact. She needed more power. More connection. Without fully understanding what she was doing, Luna drew upon every thread of supernatural energy she could sense, the life force of every tree in the forest, the wild magic that flowed through the earth itself, the ancient power that had created the first werewolves under the light of the primordial moon. The world exploded into light. When her vision cleared, Luna found herself standing in the center of the clearing, visible to every eye present. Her spirit form blazed with silver fire, no longer translucent but solid, real, undeniably present. Marcus's amber eyes went wide with shock and desperate hope. Luna? It's impossible, Silas breathed, taking an involuntary step backward. You're dead. I watched you die. Luna smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Death, she said, her voice carrying the supernatural authority of something that existed between worlds, is more complicated than you imagined. She could feel the power flowing through her now, not the earthly strength of an alpha wolf, but something far older and more dangerous. The energy of the liminal space between life and death, the raw force that governed transitions and transformations. You wanted to destroy the old bloodlines, she continued, taking a step towards Silas. The grass beneath her spirit feet caught fire, burning with cold silver flames. You wanted to remake the supernatural world according to your petty vision of male dominance. Another step. The silver fire spread outward in a circle around her. Several of the hunters raised their weapons nervously. But you made one crucial mistake, my dear Beta. Luna's eyes now blazed with power beyond anything she'd possessed in life. You forgot that some bloodlines are older than death itself. Some powers transcend the boundary between worlds. She raised her hand, and every silver weapon in the clearing began to glow white-hot. The hunters cried out in pain as their weapons became too hot to hold, silver bullets melting and running like water. Luna, Marcus whispered, wonder and fear warring in his voice. What have you become? She turned to look at him, her beloved mate, her anchor to everything good and pure in the world. Something new, she admitted. Something that exists between life and death, between the world of spirits and the realm of flesh. Then she looked back at Silas, who was now backing away in obvious terror. Something that remembers every betrayal, she said softly. And something that always collects its debts. The silver fire erupted outward from her position, racing through the clearing faster than thought. It engulfed the supernatural hunters, who screamed as the cold flames ate away at their unnatural forms. Vampires crumbled to ash. Demons fled shrieking back to whatever hell had spawned them. But the fire passed through her pack without harm, leaving them untouched in the center of what had become a circle of supernatural destruction. All except Silas. He stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, silver flames licking at his feet but not quite touching him. Luna could have killed him in that moment, she had the power, and she certainly had the justification. Instead, she smiled. Run, she said simply. Silas needed no further encouragement. He shifted into his wolf form and fled into the night, his howls of terror echoing through the forest. Luna turned back to her pack, to Marcus, prepared to explain what she'd become, to reassure them that she was still their Luna despite the supernatural fire that now blazed around her. But as she looked into their eyes, she saw something that chilled her more than death ever could. Fear. They were afraid of her. Even Marcus, her beloved mate, looked at her with a mixture of awe and terror that spoke of fundamental change in their relationship. Luna, Elena whispered, her voice barely audible. The silver fire, it's still burning. Around you. Through you. Luna looked down and realized Elena was right. The cold flames that had destroyed the hunters continued to dance across her spirit form, marking her as something other than wolf, other than alpha, other than anything the pack had ever known. I wanted to save you, she said, her voice breaking with sudden understanding. But I've become something that can't be saved. And in the distance, carried on the night wind, came the sound of howling, but not from her pack. This was Silas, calling to others of his kind, summoning allies to deal with the abomination that Luna had become. The real war was just beginning. If you are enjoying this story, do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 3. 3 days after her resurrection and subsequent disappearance, Luna discovered that existing between life and death came with its own particular brand of torment. She could see Marcus, but she couldn't touch him. She could hear his voice calling her name in the darkness, but she couldn't answer. Most cruelly of all, she could feel his anguish through their mate bond, a constant ache that reminded her of everything she'd lost and everything she could never have again. Her pack had retreated deeper into the forest after the confrontation with Silas, establishing a temporary camp in a cave system that had sheltered their kind for generations. Luna's spirit form drifted through the rocky chambers like smoke, invisible to the wolves she'd died to protect. The silver fire that had blazed around her during the battle had faded to a subtle shimmer that only she could see, but its presence reminded her constantly that she was no longer one of them. She was something else entirely. Alpha, Elena's voice carried from the main chamber, tight with exhaustion and fear. You need to rest. You haven't slept since. Since my mate died and came back as something that terrifies our own pack. Marcus's voice was raw, hollow. Sleep isn't coming easily these days. Luna's spirit form clenched with phantom pain. She'd been trying for 3 days to reach him, to let him know she was still here, still fighting for them. But every attempt to make contact had failed. Her ethereal hands passed through him like mist. Her voice couldn't find purchase in the physical world. But perhaps there was another way. That night, as Marcus finally succumbed to exhaustion in their old sleeping chamber, the one that still smelled like her, still held the impression of their bodies entwined, Luna gathered her supernatural energy and dove into his dreams. The transition was jarring, like plunging from air into water. Suddenly she was corporeal again, standing in a dreamscape version of their mating grove where sunlight filtered through autumn leaves and the air smelled of pine and possibility. Marcus was there, younger somehow, the way he'd looked when they first met. But his dream eyes held the same haunted quality that marked his waking hours. Luna? His voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking her name too loudly might shatter the fragile peace of sleep. I'm here, she said, and this time her voice carried. She could speak, could be heard, could touch his face and feel the warmth of dream skin beneath her fingers. Marcus closed his eyes at her touch, leaning into her palm like a man dying of thirst. You're not real. You can't be real. I watched you die. Death isn't what we thought it was, Luna said softly. I exist somewhere between worlds now, Marcus. I can't return to life, but I can't move on to whatever comes after. And I can reach you through dreams. His amber eyes opened, searching her face for signs of the otherworldly power that had terrified the pack. But here, in his subconscious, she appeared as she always had, his Luna, his mate, his alpha. I've been trying to warn you, she continued urgently. Silas isn't finished. The hunters he brought weren't his only allies. There are more coming. What hunters? Marcus's dream form sharpened with alertness. The creatures you destroyed. We're just the beginning. Silas has allied himself with the Salem witch hunters. The humans who killed me. Luna's form flickered with anger, the dreamscape around them darkening momentarily. He's providing them with intelligence about our kind, teaching them our weaknesses. Marcus pulled back slightly, his alpha instincts warring with his desperate need to believe she was real. How do you know this? Because I followed him. Luna's expression grew grim. After he fled from our confrontation, he went straight to Salem. To Minister Blackthorn. They're planning something, Marcus. Something that will destroy not just our pack, but every supernatural creature in the New World. The dreamscape began to fracture around them, Marcus's sleeping mind struggling to process the information. Luna could feel him beginning to wake, could sense the dream dissolving. Remember, she said urgently, gripping his hands. The old silver mine, 3 miles north of Salem. They're meeting there tomorrow night. Don't trust anyone except Elena and David. And Marcus. The dream shattered like glass, and Luna found herself back in her spirit form, watching Marcus bolt upright in the darkness. "Luna," he called out, his voice echoing through the cave system. But she was already fading, her energy depleted by the effort of dreamwalking. It took 2 more nights of visits before Marcus began to truly believe. Luna learned to conserve her supernatural energy, to slip into his dreams with greater subtlety. She showed him images of what she'd witnessed, Silas meeting with Minister Blackthorne in the abandoned silver mine, their conversations about purifying the new world of supernatural corruption, the crates of silver weapons being blessed by dark rituals. But it was the blood that finally convinced him. On the 4th night after her death, Luna managed to manifest physically for just a few moments, not the blazing spirit of power she'd become during the battle, but a faint, translucent version of herself that could move small objects if she concentrated hard enough. She knocked over Marcus's water cup, spelling out letters in the spilled liquid, "Follow." Then she led him through the forest to a clearing where she'd witnessed something that chilled her to her ethereal core. The witch hunters had been there recently. The remains of their ritual circle were still visible, silver symbols carved into the earth, blackened stones arranged in precise patterns, and at the center, a dark stain that made Marcus's wolf senses recoil in revulsion. "Blood," he whispered, dropping to one knee to examine the stain more closely. His enhanced senses could detect the metallic tang, but underneath it was something else. Something that made his hackles rise. "Wolf blood," Luna's voice came as a whisper on the wind, barely audible but unmistakably present. "They've been draining our kind, Marcus. Using our blood in their rituals." Marcus's head snapped up, searching for her, but Luna's manifestation had already faded. She'd used too much energy to become visible, even briefly. But the evidence was there. The ritual circle, the blood, and carved into a nearby tree, fresh marks that spelled out a message in the human tongue: the purification begins at the next full moon. 3 nights away. Luna spent the next day learning to manipulate her environment in subtler ways. She discovered she could influence the behavior of small animals, sending squirrels and birds as messengers. She could create illusions, phantom scents, false sounds, shadows that moved against the light. Most importantly, she learned to extend her consciousness across great distances, spying on their enemies while her spirit form remained anchored near the pack. What she discovered made her wish she'd stayed ignorant. Silas hadn't just allied with the Salem witch hunters. He'd been in contact with supernatural hunting organizations across the colonies. The letter she found him writing to contacts in Boston, New York, and Charleston painted a horrifying picture of coordinated extermination, a campaign to wipe out every werewolf pack on the continent. But the worst revelation came when she followed Minister Blackthorne to a secret meeting in Salem's old graveyard. The witch hunter wasn't entirely human anymore. Luna watched in horror as Blackthorne moved through the darkness with inhuman speed and grace, his eyes reflecting light like a predator's. When he met with his fellow hunters, she could smell the corruption that clung to them, the scent of werewolf blood absorbed and metabolized, changing them into something stronger, faster, deadlier than any mortal should be. They'd been drinking wolf blood. Bathing in it. Using it in dark rituals that granted them supernatural abilities while maintaining their human appearance. 12 packs eliminated in the past 6 months, Blackthorne reported to his assembled hunters. The Grim Wolf has been most helpful in locating their territories. Silas. They were talking about Silas. "And the Blackwood pack?" asked another hunter, a woman whose scent carried the metallic tang of silver and something darker, demon blood, Luna realized with growing horror. "Soon," Blackthorne promised. "Our ally assures us they're vulnerable. Their false alpha is dead, and the male is weak with grief. We strike tomorrow night when the moon is dark. No witnesses. No survivors." Luna fled back to the cave system, her spirit form blazing with urgency. She had to warn Marcus, had to make him understand the scope of the threat they faced. But when she arrived at the pack's temporary home, she found chaos. Marcus was arguing with Elena in the main chamber, their voices echoing off stone walls. "You've been talking to shadows and spilled water," Elena was saying, her tone gentle but firm. "Marcus, I know you're grieving, but..." "She's real," Marcus insisted. "Luna is trying to warn us. The dreams, the signs, are your mind's way of processing trauma," Elena interrupted. "Alpha, I've watched you for 4 days now. You barely eat, you don't sleep, you talk to empty air. This isn't healthy." 12 packs, Marcus said suddenly, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She said they've eliminated 12 packs in 6 months. Elena's expression shifted from concern to alarmed. "What?" "Luna warned me. The witch hunters aren't just from Salem. They're coordinated, organized. They're using Silas to track down every werewolf pack on the continent." "Marcus. And they're not entirely human anymore." Marcus's eyes blazed with sudden understanding. "They've been using our blood in rituals. Drinking it. It's making them stronger, giving them our senses, our speed." Luna's spirit form materialized beside them, pouring every ounce of her supernatural energy into becoming visible. "Elena," she said urgently, "he's telling the truth." Elena's eyes went wide with shock. She could see Luna now, faint but undeniably present. "They're coming tonight," Luna continued, her form flickering with the effort of manifestation. "Not tomorrow like I thought. I followed Blackthorn back to Salem. They moved up their timeline. Silas convinced them you're planning to attack the town, so they're coming here. Now." As if summoned by her words, a howl echoed through the forest outside the cave system. But this wasn't the call of a wolf, it was the hunting cry of something that had once been human but was now something else entirely. Marcus and Elena exchanged grim looks. "How many?" Marcus asked. "At least 30, Luna replied, her form growing fainter as her energy depleted. "All armed with silver weapons. All enhanced with wolf blood. And Silas is leading them directly to..." Her warning was cut off as the sound of footsteps echoed from the cave entrance. Multiple sets, moving with supernatural stealth. Marcus's nostrils flared. "Silver," he whispered. "And wolf blood." Through the pack bond, Luna felt the terror of every wolf in the cave system as they realized they were surrounded. The hunters had found them. And at the front of the hunting party, his scent unmistakable even corrupted by betrayal and human alliance, was Silas. "My dear pack brothers," his voice echoed through the caves, mockingly familiar. "I've brought some friends to visit." Luna's spirit form blazed with desperate energy as she realized the full scope of the trap. The hunters hadn't just surrounded the cave, they'd blocked every exit, every escape route her pack might have used. They were trapped. And for the first time since her resurrection, Luna faced the terrifying possibility that her new supernatural powers might not be enough to save the wolves she'd died to protect. Chapter 4. The first silver bullet tore through young Thomas's chest before he could even shift into his defensive form. Luna's spirit blazed with anguish as she watched the 16-year-old wolf, barely more than a pup, collapse in the main chamber, his amber eyes wide with shock and pain. Silver spread through his system like liquid fire, preventing his supernatural healing from engaging, ensuring that this wound would be his last. "No!" Marcus roared, his form already blurring as he began the shift to his massive gray wolf form. But the hunters were ready for him. Minister Blackthorn stepped into the chamber, his movement unnaturally fluid, his once pale skin now bearing a subtle luminescence that spoke of absorbed werewolf essence. In his hands, he carried a crossbow loaded with silver bolts, each one inscribed with symbols that made Luna's spirit form recoil in horror. Sacred silver. Blessed with werewolf blood and unholy rituals. "I wouldn't complete that transformation if I were you, Marcus Blackwood," Blackthorn said, his voice carrying an authority that hadn't been there during Luna's trial. The consumed wolf blood had changed him, made him stronger, more confident. "Not unless you want to watch every member of your pack die before you finish the shift." As if to emphasize his point, more hunters filed into the chamber from every entrance. Luna counted them desperately, 32 in total, just as she'd warned. All armed with silver weapons, all moving with the enhanced speed and grace that werewolf blood consumption had granted them. And at their head, wearing the satisfied smile Luna was beginning to hate more than death itself, was Silas. "Hello, brother," Silas said mockingly, inclining his head toward Marcus. "I hope you've enjoyed playing Alpha these past few years. Tonight, that little game comes to an end." Marcus's partial shift froze, his form caught between human and wolf, elongated limbs, extended canines, amber eyes blazing with fury. "You're not my brother anymore," he snarled. "The moment you betrayed Luna, you ceased to be part of this pack." Silas laughed, a sound that echoed strangely off the cave walls. "Betrayed her? I liberated us from her. Do you have any idea how freeing it's been? To finally work with humans instead of hiding from them? To use our natural superiority instead of pretending to be equals with livestock." As he spoke, Silas began his own transformation, but not into the wolf form Luna remembered. The wolf that emerged was larger, darker, his fur bearing silver streaks that hadn't been there before. Most unnaturally, his eyes glowed with the cold light of silver rather than the warm amber of pack wolves. Luna's spirit form went cold with understanding. Silas hadn't just allied with the witch hunters, he'd undergone their blood rituals himself. He was as much monster as the humans he'd joined. "You're no longer even werewolf," Elena breathed, her voice tight with horror as she took in Silas's corrupted form. "I'm evolution," Silas replied. "The next step in our species' development. Werewolves who embrace our predatory nature instead of hiding from it. Who work with humans to eliminate the weak and preserve only the strong." He gestured to the hunters surrounding them. "These humans understand proper hierarchy. They accept werewolf superiority, as long as we help them eliminate the werewolves who refuse to serve." Marcus's claws extended fully. "And you think I'll serve?" "Oh, Marcus," Silas said, his silver eyes gleaming with malicious pleasure. "You won't be serving anyone. You'll be dying. Slowly. Painfully. While your pack watches and learns what happens to those who support female leadership." Luna tried desperately to manifest physically, to blaze with the same supernatural fire that had destroyed the first group of hunters. But her energy was depleted from the dream walking, from maintaining her awareness across multiple locations. She could barely maintain her spirit form, let alone become corporeal enough to fight. She was going to watch her family die, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "Begin with the young ones," Blackthorn ordered. "Let the Alpha see the cost of resistance." The hunters raised their silver weapons, aiming at the juvenile wolves who huddled together in terror. Luna recognized them all: children she'd helped raise, pups she'd trained, young adults who looked to her as both alpha and surrogate mother. "Stop!" Marcus shouted. "If you want me, take me. Leave the others alone." "Oh, we'll take you," Silas promised. "But first, you need to understand what happens when packs resist the new order." The silver crossbow bolts flew in perfect unison. 7 young wolves fell in the first volley. Luna's spirit form screamed, a sound that somehow carried into the physical world, echoing off the cave walls with supernatural anguish. But her cry couldn't stop the slaughter, couldn't save the children who looked up at her with dying eyes that still held trust, still held love. "Run!" Elena shouted to the survivors. "Scatter! Get out of here!" Some of the remaining wolves tried to flee through the smaller cave passages, but the hunters had been thorough in their planning. Silver nets fell from concealed positions. Crossbow bolts found their marks with unerring precision. The caves that had protected Luna's pack for generations had become a killing ground. David, Marcus's most trusted scout, managed to reach wolf form before 3 silver bullets tore through his chest and abdomen. He collapsed at Marcus's feet, his amber eyes finding his alpha's face. "Protect the bloodline," he whispered with his last breath. Luna watched in spirit-bound helplessness as wolf after wolf fell to silver weapons. These weren't deaths in honorable combat, they were executions, systematic eliminations designed to break Marcus's spirit before claiming his life. Margaret, the pack's healer. Dead. Jonathan and his mate Sarah, who had just announced Sarah's pregnancy. Dead. Old Henrik, who had served as pack historian and keeper of the ancient laws. Dead. Within 10 minutes, the cave floor was slick with blood and silver, and Luna's family, her pack, her children in all but blood, lay scattered like broken dolls. Only 5 wolves remained alive, Marcus, Elena, and 3 juveniles who had managed to reach the deeper cave passages. But even as Luna watched, the hunters were herding the youngsters back toward the main chamber. Enough! Marcus roared, his voice carrying the full supernatural authority of an alpha in extremis. The sound reverberated through the caves with such force that several hunters staggered backward. But Silas only smiled wider. Still trying to command, I see. How traditional of you. He gestured to Blackthorn, who produced a set of silver shackles from his coat. Chain him. But keep him conscious. I want him to watch what we do to the survivors. Luna's spirit form blazed with desperate fury as the silver shackles closed around Marcus's wrists and ankles. The blessed metal burned his skin, sending wisps of smoke rising from the contact points. His enhanced healing fought the silver poisoning, but the shackles were designed to deliver a continuous dose of purified silver directly into his bloodstream. He would live, for a while. Long enough to suffer. Long enough to watch the final destruction of everything he'd protected. Elena, Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the pain. When you get the chance, run. Get the youngsters out of here. Find the scattered survivors. Rebuild. Elena met his eyes across the blood-soaked chamber. I won't leave you, Alpha. That's an order, Marcus replied. The pack needs. A silver-tipped spear thrust through Elena's chest from behind, emerging from her ribcage with a wet sound that made Luna's spirit form shudder with anguish. Elena looked down at the spear point with surprise rather than pain, her hands coming up to touch the silver that was already spreading poison through her system. She turned to see which hunter had struck the killing blow and found herself face to face with another corrupted werewolf, one of Silas's new recruits. Elena. Marcus strained against his shackles, silver burns deepening as he fought to reach his dying packmate. Elena's legs gave out, and she collapsed to the cave floor. But as she fell, her eyes found Luna's spirit form. For just a moment, their gazes met, and Elena smiled. It was a strange expression for a dying wolf to wear. Not peaceful acceptance, not even defiant rage. It was satisfied. Almost pleased. Luna's spirit form flickered with confusion. Something was wrong with this picture, something that didn't fit. Elena's scent. Even dying, even with silver poison spreading through her system, Elena's scent was off. Muted. As if she were deliberately suppressing it. As if she were hiding something. 23 wolves eliminated, Blackthorn reported to Silas with clinical satisfaction. 3 juveniles remain, plus the alpha. Perfect, Silas replied. Bring the young ones forward. Let Marcus watch them die, then we'll take him back to Salem for a proper execution. The townspeople should see what happens when werewolves refuse to submit to proper authority. The hunters dragged the 3 surviving juveniles, barely more than children, into the main chamber. Luna recognized them, Anna, 15 years old and Marcus's cousin, Peter, 16 and Thomas's younger brother, and little Sarah, only 13 and the smallest wolf in the pack. They were terrified, silver-collared and shaking, but they stood as straight as they could manage. Luna felt a fierce pride cut through her anguish. Even in death, her pack maintained their dignity. Any last words for your young charges, Alpha? Silas asked mockingly. Marcus looked at the 3 juvenile wolves, his amber eyes steady despite the silver burning through his system. Remember who you are, he said quietly. Remember the old laws. Remember that being alpha means protecting those who cannot protect themselves, no matter the cost. How touching, Silas said. Kill them. The hunters raised their weapons for the final execution. That was when Luna's rage reached a level that transcended the boundary between life and death. She had watched her pack die. She had seen children murdered, elders slaughtered, her mate chained and tortured. She had remained trapped in spirit form, helpless, powerless, unable to save the wolves who had looked to her for protection. No more. Deep in the forest, 3 miles away, Luna's burned corpse, buried in a shallow grave by Salem's conscientious citizens, began to smolder with silver fire. The supernatural flames ate through dirt and stone, through the rotted fabric of her burial shroud, through the decay that had claimed her physical form. Her spirit, her essence, her very soul began to pull away from the liminal space between worlds and toward the charred remains of her body. The laws of death, the natural order that kept spirit separate from flesh, began to bend under the weight of alpha rage and supernatural will. In the cave, Luna's spirit form suddenly blazed with blinding light. "What?" Silas began, then stumbled backward as Luna's presence became a physical force in the chamber. "You want to see an alpha's power?" Luna's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere, carrying the authority of something that existed beyond death itself. "You want to understand what happens when you threaten an alpha's pack?" The temperature in the cave dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Ice began forming on the walls. The hunter's breath misted in the suddenly frigid air. "Then let me show you," Luna continued, her spirit form now visible to every eye in the chamber, "what it really means to defy the ancient bloodlines." 3 miles away, her corpse sat up in its grave, silver fire blazing from empty eye sockets. And for the first time since her execution, Luna Blackwood began to truly smile. Chapter 5. The reunion of spirit and flesh felt like being struck by lightning from the inside out. Luna's consciousness slammed back into her burned corpse with such violent force that the ground around her grave exploded outward in a crater of silver fire and scorched earth. 3 miles away, every supernatural being within a 100-mile radius felt the shockwave, a psychic tsunami that announced the impossible had occurred. Something dead had chosen to live again. Luna's first sensation was pain. Not the dull ache of injury or the sharp bite of silver, but something far more fundamental, the agony of existence itself, of consciousness forced into a vessel that had been claimed by death and decay. Her second sensation was rage so pure it burned hotter than the silver fire that now coursed through her veins instead of blood. She opened her eyes, or what had been her eyes. Where emerald green had once sparkled with life, now twin flames of silver fire blazed in hollow sockets. Her hair, once dark and lustrous, now appeared to be made of smoke and shadow that moved with supernatural wind. Her skin, where it remained at all, bore the texture of charcoal and ash, held together by will and vengeance rather than mortal flesh. She was beautiful in the way that forest fires and lightning strikes were beautiful, terrible, magnificent, and utterly deadly. Luna rose from her grave like a nightmare-given form, silver flames dancing around her resurrected body. She was no longer entirely wolf, no longer entirely human, no longer entirely spirit. She was something new, something that existed in the spaces between life and death, between the natural and supernatural worlds. She was evolution born of rage and love in equal measure. The moment her feet touched the ground, reality shuddered around her. She could feel the fabric of existence strain under the weight of her impossible resurrection, could sense the barrier between the world of the living and the realm of the dead beginning to crack. But Luna had no time to contemplate the metaphysical implications of her return. Through the supernatural connection that death had somehow strengthened rather than severed, she could feel Marcus's agony, could sense his life force flickering like a candle in a hurricane. They were torturing him. And they were preparing to kill him. Luna didn't run to Salem, she simply willed herself there, her resurrected form moving through space with the same ease her spirit had once moved through dreams. One moment she stood among the ruins of her grave, the next she materialized in Salem's town square where a new gallows had been hastily constructed. The scene before her ignited the silver fire in her veins to an inferno. Marcus hung from silver chains attached to a wooden frame, his body bearing the systematic marks of torture. Silver-tipped whips had flayed the skin from his back. Silver needles had been driven through his hands and feet. His amber eyes, once bright with alpha authority, now dimmed with pain and blood loss. But he was still alive. Still defiant. Even hanging in silver chains, he held his head high and met his tormentors' gazes without flinching. Minister Blackthorn stood before the assembled crowd, a mix of Salem townsfolk and the corrupted hunters who had slaughtered Luna's pack. In his hands, he held a silver blade inscribed with the same unholy symbols that had been carved into the ritual circle. "Behold," Blackthorn declared to the crowd, the fate of all who would consort with demons and practice the dark arts. This beast called himself an alpha, claimed dominion over the creatures of Shadow and Fong. But see how he hangs before us now, broken, defeated, ready to confess his sins before meeting his maker. Marcus raised his head with obvious effort. The only sin, he said, his voice hoarse but carrying, is the one you've committed against the innocent. And that sin will not go unpunished. Blackthorn laughed. Your demon witch is dead, beast. We burned her corpse to ash and scattered it to the wind. No vengeance will come from. You're wrong. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carrying the authority of something that transcended mortal understanding. The temperature in the town square dropped 20 degrees in seconds, and frost began forming on the gallows despite the October warmth. Luna materialized in the center of the square like a phoenix rising from its own ashes. But this phoenix was made of silver fire and supernatural fury, and her resurrection sent shock waves through every living thing present. The crowd's reaction was immediate and primal. Some fainted outright. Others fell to their knees in terror, crossing themselves and muttering prayers. A few tried to run but found their legs wouldn't obey them. Luna's presence had triggered the deepest, most ancient fear hardwired into human consciousness. The fear of being prey. Luna, Marcus whispered, his amber eyes going wide with a mixture of hope and horror. She turned to look at him, and for a moment her terrible beauty softened with love. I told you death was more complicated than we imagined, she said gently. Did you think a little thing like hanging would keep me from protecting my pack? But even as she spoke to Marcus, Luna could feel something wrong with her resurrection. The silver fire that had replaced her blood was consuming her from within, burning away pieces of who she had been. Her memories felt scattered, fragmented. Her emotions, once complex and nuanced, had been refined down to their most essential elements, love for her pack and rage against their enemies. She was losing her humanity with each passing moment. Impossible, Blackthorn breathed, though his enhanced senses, boosted by consumed werewolf blood, told him exactly what he was seeing. You're dead. I watched you die. Death, Luna said, turning her blazing gaze upon the minister, is just another state of being. And I've decided I don't like it very much. She raised her hand, and the silver chains holding Marcus began to glow white-hot. But instead of burning him further, the metal simply unmade itself. The chains dissolved into silver mist that dispersed harmlessly into the air. Marcus collapsed to the gallows platform, his injuries severe but no longer life-threatening. The moment he was free from the silver's influence, his supernatural healing began to work, slowly knitting together the worst of his wounds. Run, Luna said without taking her eyes off Blackthorn. Get the others. Get to safety. I won't leave you again, Marcus said, struggling to his feet despite his injuries. You're not leaving me, Luna replied. You're protecting what remains of our pack. Which is what an alpha does. The finality in her voice made Marcus understand that this wasn't a request, it was a command from something that had transcended even alpha authority. As Marcus limped away from the gallows, the corrupted hunters finally overcame their paralysis and raised their silver weapons. But when they pulled their triggers, the bullets simply passed through Luna's form as if she were made of smoke. My turn, Luna said with a smile that would have given nightmares to demons. She gestured toward the nearest group of hunters, and silver fire erupted from the ground beneath their feet. But this wasn't the cold flame she'd wielded as a spirit, this was something hungry, alive, eager to consume. The corrupted humans screamed as the fire ate away at the werewolf blood they'd absorbed, purifying them in the most painful way possible. Within seconds, they were nothing but ash scattered on the October wind. Retreat! Blackthorn shouted to his remaining forces. Fall back to the secondary positions. But Luna was already moving among them, her resurrected form shifting between solid and ethereal as it suited her needs. She passed through their silver weapons like mist, then became solid enough to tear out throats with claws that burned with supernatural fire. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Within minutes, the town square was littered with the remains of corrupted hunters and blessed silver weapons. The townsfolk who had cheered Luna's execution now cowered behind barricaded doors, and the few surviving hunters had fled into the forest. Only Blackthorn remained, backed against the gallows with a silver crucifix clutched in his shaking hands. "You cannot harm me," he declared, though his voice trembled with terror. "I serve a higher power. I am protected by—" Luna appeared directly in front of him, her form now solid and terrible. "Your higher power," she said conversationally, "seems to have taken the day off." She reached out and touched the silver crucifix. It melted like butter in her hands, the blessed metal unable to withstand the supernatural fire that coursed through her resurrected form. "But I'm not here to kill you, Minister," Luna continued, her voice almost gentle. "I'm here to give you a message." Blackthorn's eyes went wide with confusion and hope. "A message? Tell every hunter, every corrupted human, every enemy of my kind," Luna said, leaning close enough that Blackthorn could feel the heat radiating from her silver fire, "that Luna Blackwood has returned. Tell them that I remember every face, every scent, every voice that cheered my death. And tell them." She smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. "Tell them I'm coming for all of them." She released Blackthorn, who collapsed to his knees gasping for air he hadn't realized he'd been holding. When he looked up again, Luna was gone. She found Marcus and the 3 surviving juveniles hiding in an abandoned barn outside Salem. The moment she materialized in the doorway, the young wolves backed away in instinctive fear, not of Luna specifically, but of what she had become. "It's all right," Marcus said quietly, though Luna could smell his own uncertainty. "It's still Luna. It's still our Alpha." But Luna could see the doubt in his amber eyes, could sense his struggle to reconcile the woman he'd loved with the supernatural force she'd become. The silver fire burning in her veins was consuming more of her humanity with each passing hour, leaving behind something powerful but increasingly alien. "Most of the pack is gone," Marcus reported, his voice carefully neutral. "But some escaped the massacre. Elena managed to." "I'm here, Alpha." Elena stepped out of the shadows at the back of the barn, and Luna felt a shock of surprise that penetrated even her supernatural detachment. Elena was alive, not just alive, but completely uninjured. There was no sign of the silver spear that had pierced her chest, no trace of the poison that should have killed her. "How?" Luna asked. Elena smiled, the same satisfied expression she'd worn while dying in the cave. "I've been practicing some tricks I learned from watching your spirit form. Turns out werewolf healing can be accelerated under the right circumstances. Especially if you know how to fake death convincingly enough to fool corrupted humans." Understanding dawned in Luna's silver flame eyes. "You've been planning this." "From the moment you first contacted me in dreams," Elena confirmed. "We couldn't save the pack from the massacre, there were too many hunters, too much silver, too much betrayal. But we could make sure some survived. We could make sure there would be revenge." Elena gestured to the shadows behind her, and Luna's enhanced senses picked up movement. Pack members she'd thought dead, juveniles who had escaped through hidden passages, elders who had feigned death until the hunters moved on. 15 wolves total. Not many, but enough to rebuild. "We've been gathering intelligence," Elena continued. "Tracking down the hunters who escaped, mapping their safe houses, identifying their allies. We know where Silas has gone. We know what he's planning next." "And what is he planning?" Luna asked, though part of her already knew the answer. Elena's expression darkened. "Expansion. He's calling it the Great Purification, a coordinated campaign to eliminate every werewolf pack in the New World. But first..." Elena paused, clearly reluctant to deliver this particular piece of information. "First what?" Marcus demanded. "He has Lydia," Elena said quietly. The words hit Luna like a physical blow. Lydia, her daughter, Marcus's daughter, the 3-year-old child they'd hidden away with a pack of wolves living deep in the Canadian wilderness, far from the conflicts that had consumed Luna's life. "That's impossible," Marcus said. "She's hundreds of miles from here. The northern pack would never." "The northern pack is gone," Elena interrupted. "Silas found them 2 weeks ago. Most were killed. A few were converted. And Lydia was taken alive. Luna's silver fire blazed higher, frost spreading across the barn walls as her supernatural fury reached new heights. Where is she? We don't know, Elena admitted. But Silas sent a message through one of his corrupted wolves. He wants to meet with you, Luna. Just you. He says if you don't come to him within 3 days, he'll perform the same blood rituals on Lydia that he underwent himself. The implications of that threat made Luna's resurrected form flicker with rage. The blood rituals that had corrupted Silas, that had given the hunters their supernatural abilities, they were designed for adults, for beings whose supernatural nature had fully matured. To perform such rituals on a 3-year-old child. It would either kill her or transform her into something monstrous beyond imagining. But as Luna's fury reached its peak, she became aware of something else, a presence at the edge of her consciousness, something vast and hungry and patient. She turned her attention inward and felt her blood freeze with understanding. Her resurrection had torn a hole between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. And something ancient and terrible was beginning to notice the opening she'd created. We sensed the breach, a voice whispered in her mind, not words, but concepts that bypassed language entirely. We sensed the one who broke the ancient laws. We come. Luna's silver flame eyes went wide with horror as she realized what she'd done. In breaking the barrier between life and death, she hadn't just resurrected herself, she'd opened a doorway for every vengeful spirit, every ancient evil, every nightmare that had been safely contained in the realm beyond death. They were coming. All of them. And they were coming because of her. Luna? Marcus's voice seemed to come from very far away. What's wrong? You look. We have to move, Luna said urgently, pushing aside the cosmic horror of what she'd unleashed to focus on the immediate threat. All of us. Now. But Lydia, Elena began. Lydia first, Luna agreed. But we're not the only predators hunting anymore. My resurrection has consequences. Things that should stay dead are beginning to wake up. We need to find our daughter and get everyone to safety before. A howl echoed across the Massachusetts countryside, but this wasn't the call of any living wolf. This was the hunting cry of something that had died centuries ago and was now clawing its way back to the world of the living. Luna's silver fire dimmed as she realized the full scope of what she'd set in motion. She'd wanted to save her pack, to protect her family, to have her revenge. Instead, she might have doomed them all. If you are enjoying this story, do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Chapter 6. The first hunter died screaming. Luna found William Marsh hiding in a root cellar beneath his farmhouse, 20 miles west of Salem. The man who had helped construct her gallows, who had cheered loudest when the rope snapped her neck, cowered behind barrels of salted pork like a child hiding from monsters in the dark. Which, Luna supposed, was exactly what he was doing. Please, Marsh whimpered as Luna's silver flame form materialized in the cramped cellar. I was just following orders. The minister, he said. He said what? Luna asked, her voice carrying the otherworldly authority of something that existed beyond death itself. The moment she spoke, her new abilities engaged without conscious thought. She could taste the lies on Marsh's breath, could see the deception written in the rapid flutter of his pulse, could smell the guilt that seeped from his pores like sweat. More than that, she could command the fear that already consumed him, amplifying it until terror became a living thing that crawled through his veins. He said you were demons. Marsh gasped, his eyes going wide as Luna's supernatural presence pressed against his mind. Evil creatures that threatened God-fearing folk. Truth. But not the whole truth. Luna took a step closer, her form shifting between solid and ethereal as her mood dictated. Around her, the very air began to shimmer with the spirits of the recently dead, pack members who had died in the massacre, their ethereal forms drawn to her like moths to flame. What else did he say, William? Luna asked softly. Marsh's fear spiked higher as the ghostly wolves began to circle him. These spirits weren't fully manifest, only Luna could see them clearly, but Marsh could sense their presence, could feel their hunger for justice. He said. Marsh's voice broke as Luna's power overwhelmed his will to resist. He said there was a war coming. A great conflict between the supernatural creatures and the righteous. He said we needed to be ready. Luna's silver flame eyes blazed brighter. What war? I don't know. Marsh sobbed. The minister, he spoke of ancient powers stirring, of creatures from the old world crossing the ocean. Vampires from Europe, demons from the southern colonies, witches gathering in covens. He said the werewolves were just the beginning. The truth of his words rang clear in Luna's supernatural senses, but she could smell deeper secrets still hidden in his terrified mind. She gestured to the spirits surrounding them, and one of the ghostly wolves, young Thomas, barely visible but unmistakably present, padded closer to the cowering human. Where is my daughter? Luna asked. I don't know about any daughter, Marsh whispered. Lie. Luna's form blazed with silver fire, and Marsh screamed as the temperature in the cellar dropped below freezing. Ice crystals formed on his breath, and frost spread across the earthen walls. Let me rephrase the question, Luna said, her voice now carrying the chill of the grave. Where has Silas taken the alpha child? Marsh's resistance crumbled completely under the combined weight of Luna's supernatural authority and the terror-induced visions her presence created in his mind. North, he gasped. 3 days' ride north. An old fortress in the mountains. But please, I was just. He never finished the sentence. Luna's claws, now made of solid silver fire, opened his throat with surgical precision. As Marsh's blood pooled on the cellar floor, the spirits of her dead pack members fed on the offering, growing more solid, more present in the physical world. Luna watched Marsh die with detached satisfaction, noting how his life force seemed to strengthen the ghostly wolves around her. Another of her new abilities, she could bind the spirits of the dead to her will, creating an army that existed between worlds. She felt no remorse for the killing. No guilt for the terror she'd inflicted. The part of her that might have mourned the necessity of such violence had been burned away during her resurrection, leaving behind something purer, more focused. More dangerous. When she emerged from the cellar, Marcus was waiting for her in the farmhouse kitchen. His amber eyes took in the blood on her claws, the satisfied gleam in her silver flame gaze, and she could smell his growing unease. Did you learn anything? He asked carefully. North, Luna replied, wiping Marsh's blood from her claws with a kitchen towel as if she'd just finished preparing dinner. 3 days' ride to a mountain fortress. And Marcus, there's something larger happening here. The hunters aren't just targeting werewolves. They're preparing for a war against all supernatural creatures. Marcus nodded, but Luna could sense his attention was focused more on her casual attitude toward the killing than on the intelligence she'd gathered. Luna, he said quietly, you didn't have to torture him. He would have talked eventually. This was faster, Luna replied with a shrug. And more satisfying. The words sent a chill through Marcus that had nothing to do with Luna's supernatural presence. This wasn't the woman he'd fallen in love with, wasn't the alpha who had led their pack with wisdom and compassion. This was something else, something that wore Luna's face but thought with the cold logic of a predator. We should move, Luna continued, already heading for the door. Elena's team should have finished with the hunters in Danvers by now. We'll rendezvous at the old oak grove and plan our approach to the mountain fortress. Marcus followed her outside, where the rest of their reformed pack waited in the treeline. 15 wolves in various states of transformation, all looking to Luna for guidance, all trying to hide their own unease at what their alpha had become. Over the past 3 days, they had systematically hunted down every hunter who had participated in the massacre. Luna's supernatural abilities made the task almost trivially easy. She could sense their locations across vast distances, could command lesser spirits to spy on their enemies, could instill such terror in her targets that they often revealed everything she wanted to know before she even asked. But with each kill, each act of revenge, Luna seemed to drift further from her former humanity. The silver fire in her veins burned away pieces of who she'd been, leaving behind something that was undeniably powerful but increasingly alien. Elena emerged from the forest, her muzzle stained with fresh blood. She'd been hunting a group of hunters holed up in an abandoned church, and from her satisfied expression, Luna could tell the mission had been successful. 6 more eliminated, Elena reported as she shifted back to human form. But one of them said something interesting before he died. Something about the blood harvest being nearly complete. Luna's silver flame eyes narrowed. Blood harvest? Alpha blood specifically, Elena continued. Apparently they've been collecting it from every pack they've destroyed. Storing it in some kind of ritual vessels. The hunter claimed they needed it for something called the Great Working. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October night air. Luna, we need to be careful. If they're collecting alpha blood for rituals, then we'll stop them, Luna interrupted. After we get Lydia back. But Marcus could hear the difference in her voice when she spoke their daughter's name. 3 days ago, Luna would have said it with desperate love, with parental protectiveness. Now it sounded more like a tactical objective. They traveled north through the night, moving at supernatural speed through forests that seemed to bend around Luna's presence. The trees whispered secrets to her now, the very earth shared its knowledge of who had passed this way. Her connection to the spirit world grew stronger with each hour, but her connection to the living world, to Marcus, to her pack, to her own humanity, grew correspondingly weaker. By dawn, they had reached the foothills of the mountain range that stretched north into the Canadian wilderness. Luna's enhanced senses could detect the fortress Marsh had described, an ancient structure built into the mountainside, its walls carved from living rock and reinforced with iron and silver. But she could also sense something else. Something that made her silver fire burn with anticipation. There, she said, pointing toward a barely visible structure high on the mountainside. That's where they're holding Lydia. Marcus squinted into the morning light. I can barely see it. How can you be sure? Because I can hear her crying, Luna said simply. The words froze Marcus's blood. His own supernatural hearing was acute, but he could detect nothing from the distant fortress. Either Luna's abilities had grown far beyond anything he could comprehend, or she was hearing things that weren't there. Luna, he said carefully, we need to scout the fortress properly. Plan our approach. We can't just. Yes, we can, Luna interrupted. Around her, the spirits of their dead pack members began to manifest more solidly, their ghostly forms gaining substance from her rage and determination. I've spent 3 days being methodical, being careful, being strategic. But our daughter is in there, Marcus. She's been in there for days, probably terrified, probably hurt. The silver fire in Luna's veins flared brighter, and frost began forming on the ground around her feet. I'm done being patient. Before Marcus could stop her, Luna's form blazed with supernatural light and she simply vanished. One moment she stood with the pack in the foothills, the next she was gone, leaving behind only the lingering scent of silver fire and otherworldly power. Damn, Elena muttered. She's losing herself faster than I expected. Marcus turned to look at his beta, hearing the resignation in her voice. You expected this? Marcus, Elena said gently, Luna died. What came back isn't entirely her anymore. The longer she exists in this state, the more she becomes something else. We knew this might happen. Then why didn't you tell me? Marcus demanded. Because you never would have let her go through with the resurrection if you'd known the cost, Elena replied. And we needed her power to save what was left of the pack. Marcus felt the ground shift beneath his feet as he realized the full implications of Elena's words. You planned this. All of it. You wanted Luna to become this. I wanted Luna to become whatever was necessary to ensure our survival, Elena corrected. And it worked. We're alive. We have our revenge. Soon we'll have Lydia back. But we've lost Luna, Marcus said quietly. Elena's expression softened with genuine regret. Yes. We have. High on the mountainside, Luna materialized inside the fortress like a wraith made solid. Her supernatural senses immediately mapped the structure, ancient corridors carved from stone, chambers reinforced with silver, and at the center, a ritual space that reeked of blood and dark magic. But underneath all of that, she could smell something precious and familiar. Lydia. Luna followed her daughter's scent through twisting corridors, her form shifting between solid and ethereal as she avoided the guards. These weren't ordinary humans. She could smell the corruption on them, the taint of ritual consumption of supernatural blood. But they were no match for something that existed between life and death. She found the ritual chamber at the fortress's heart, and what she saw there made her silver fire blaze with fury that transcended reason. Lydia hung suspended in the center of the room, silver chains holding her small form above a complex ritual circle carved into the stone floor. Around the circle, dozens of vessels contained blood, some fresh, some ancient, all of it gleaming with the telltale shimmer of alpha essence. But worse than the ritual setup was Lydia's condition. The 3-year-old child was unconscious, her small body bearing the marks of ritual scarification. Someone had been preparing her for the same blood corruption that had transformed Silas and the hunters. Luna's rage reached levels that defied supernatural measurement. The temperature in the chamber plummeted. Ice formed on the walls. The very air began to crack with silver lightning. And then Silas stepped out of the shadows. "Hello, Luna," he said with that same satisfied smile that haunted her memories. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." He looked different now, more changed than when she'd last seen him. The silver corruption had advanced, turning his eyes into mirrors that reflected no soul behind them. His form flickered between wolf and human and something else entirely, something that had never been natural. "Release her," Luna said, her voice carrying the authority of something that commanded both the living and the dead. "Oh, I will," Silas promised. "But first, let me show you what we've accomplished with the blood of your fallen pack." He gestured to the vessels around the ritual circle. 23 alpha essences, distilled and concentrated. Do you know what kind of power that represents? What kind of army we can create with this much supernatural fuel? Luna's form blazed brighter. "I don't care about your army. I care about my daughter." "Your daughter," Silas mused, looking up at the suspended child, "is going to become the first of a new breed. Alpha-born, but raised in the proper hierarchy. She'll lead the supernatural soldiers we create from this blood, but she'll serve human masters as nature intended." "Over my dead body," Luna snarled. Silas laughed. "Luna, you are dead. What stands before me is just an echo, a ghost with delusions of power. But don't worry, when we're finished with little Lydia, she'll help us send you to whatever hell spawned you." Luna raised her claws, silver fire dancing between her fingers, ready to tear Silas apart and damn the consequences. That was when Lydia opened her eyes. The child looked down from her silver chains, her gaze finding Luna's blazing form. For a moment, just a moment, Luna expected to see recognition, relief, love in her daughter's eyes. Instead, she saw terror. Lydia's scream pierced the air, a sound of pure childhood horror that cut through Luna's supernatural defenses like silver through flesh. The 3-year-old struggled frantically against her chains, not trying to reach Luna but trying to get away from her. "Mama." Lydia sobbed, but she wasn't calling to Luna. She was calling for someone, anyone, to save her from the monster that had invaded her prison. Luna stood frozen in the ritual chamber, silver fire dimming as she realized the horrible truth. In saving her pack, in pursuing her revenge, in becoming something powerful enough to protect those she loved, she had transformed into something her own daughter couldn't recognize. Something her own daughter feared more than the enemies who had captured her. And in that moment of realization, Luna felt the last piece of her humanity burn away in the silver fire that had become her soul. Chapter 7. Lydia's screams shattered something in Luna that she hadn't even realized still existed. The 3-year-old child thrashed against her silver chains, her terror so profound that it filled the ritual chamber with the sharp scent of childhood fear, pure, innocent, and utterly directed at the monster Luna had become. "Don't let it hurt me." Lydia sobbed, her amber eyes, so like Marcus's, wide with the kind of primal terror that only children could feel. "Please don't let the fire thing hurt me." Fire thing. Her own daughter saw her as a creature, not a person. Not Mama. Luna's silver flame form flickered as the realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. She took an involuntary step backward, her ethereal hands coming up as if to ward off her daughter's terror. "Lydia," she whispered, her otherworldly voice cracking with an emotion she could barely remember how to feel. "Baby, it's me. It's Mama." But the child's screams only grew louder, more desperate. The silver fire that wreathed Luna's form, the power she'd thought would protect her family, blazed in direct response to her emotional turmoil, making her appear even more monstrous to her daughter's eyes. "Fascinating," Silas observed from the shadows, his corrupted voice carrying dark amusement. The great Luna Blackwood, reduced to begging for recognition from a terrified child. How the mighty have fallen. Luna spun toward him, silver fire coalescing around her claws. "Release her. Now." "Oh, I don't think so," Silas replied, beginning to circle the ritual chamber like a predator toying with wounded prey. "You see, little Lydia here has become quite valuable to me. Not just as leverage against you, but as something much more important." He gestured toward the blood-filled vessels arranged around the ritual circle. "Did you know that alpha children conceived before their mother's transformation carry unique properties in their blood? The child doesn't just inherit supernatural abilities, she inherits the supernatural evolution. She's a bridge between what werewolves were and what they're becoming." Luna's form blazed brighter with fury, but underneath the rage, she felt something else stirring, a deeper understanding of what Silas was truly planning. "You're not just trying to corrupt her," Luna realized. "You're trying to harvest her essence." "Very good," Silas said approvingly. "The blood of an alpha child born from transformation provides the perfect base for our new supernatural soldiers. One child like Lydia could create an army of creatures that combine the best aspects of werewolf and human, with none of the weaknesses of either." Luna's claws extended to their full length, silver fire dancing between her fingers. "I'll tear you apart before I let you touch her." "With what?" Silas asked mockingly. "Look at yourself, Luna. Really look." Against her will, Luna glanced down at her own form. What she saw made her silver fire dim with horror. She was fading. Not just becoming less solid, actually fading away, piece by piece. Her legs were already more spirit than substance, wisps of silver flame that barely maintained cohesion. The corruption of her resurrection was accelerating, consuming her from the inside out. "You're becoming more ghost than wolf," Silas continued with clinical interest. "How long do you think you have before you dissipate entirely? A day? An hour?" Luna tried to deny it, but she could feel the truth in her ethereal bones. The silver fire that gave her power was also consuming her essence, burning away everything that anchored her to existence. Soon there would be nothing left but hunger and rage, and then even those would fade into nothingness. That was when Marcus arrived. He materialized in the chamber entrance with Elena and 3 other pack members, all armed with weapons they'd taken from dead hunters. His amber eyes immediately found Lydia suspended above the ritual circle, then moved to Luna's fading form. "Mama Marcus." Lydia cried out, her terror transforming into desperate hope. "Save me from the monster. Please." The words hit Marcus like silver bullets, but he moved without hesitation toward the ritual circle. "It's all right, sweetheart," he called to Lydia. "Daddy's here. I'm going to get you down." Daddy. Not Papa, not the informal address she'd used before Luna's death. Daddy, the formal term she'd learned to use when she was scared and needed protection. Protection from the monster that had once been her mother. Luna watched Marcus approach their daughter, saw the way Lydia reached for him with desperate trust, and felt something crack in what remained of her heart. This was what her quest for revenge had cost her, not just her humanity, but her family's love. "I wouldn't," Silas warned as Marcus reached for the chains holding Lydia. "Those bonds are rigged with a rather ingenious mechanism. If anyone other than me touches them, they'll flood the child's system with enough silver to kill her in seconds." Marcus froze, his hand inches from Lydia's bindings. "What do you want?" "Simple," Silas replied. "Luna agrees to serve as a battery for our great working. Her unique resurrection energy will power the transformation of our supernatural army. In exchange, I let the child live." "No," Elena said flatly from the chamber entrance. "We didn't come this far to hand Luna over to you. Then you'll watch the child die," Silas said with casual indifference. Along with every other supernatural creature on this continent when the great working begins. Luna felt the pack's attention focus on her, felt the weight of their expectations and fears. Elena's face showed grim calculation. She was already weighing the cost of one child against the survival of their species. The other pack members looked between Luna and Lydia, torn between loyalty to their alpha and protection of an innocent. But it was Marcus's expression that cut deepest. His amber eyes held love and loss in equal measure as he looked at Luna, love for who she had been, loss for what she had become. Luna, he said quietly, you have to choose. The monster you've become, or the family you used to protect. The words hung in the air like a judgment from heaven itself. Luna looked at her daughter, still whimpering in terror, still seeing her as something to be feared rather than loved. She looked at Marcus, her mate, her anchor to everything good in the world, now treating her like a stranger. She looked at her pack, the wolves she'd died to protect, now questioning whether she was worth following. And then she felt it. A flutter deep within her ethereal form, so faint she almost missed it. A presence that shouldn't exist, couldn't exist, but was undeniably there. Life. New life. Luna's silver flame eyes went wide with impossible understanding. The child she'd been carrying when she died, the second pregnancy she'd barely suspected before her execution, was still there. Still growing. Still alive within her resurrected form. But the life growing within her wasn't natural. Fed by silver fire instead of blood, nourished by vengeance instead of love, the unborn child was becoming something else entirely. Something that would be born as she had been reborn, caught between life and death, consuming everything around it to fuel its existence. A creature of pure supernatural hunger. "Oh goddess," Luna whispered, her hands moving to her ethereal abdomen. "What have I done?" Silas's corrupted senses detected the change in her immediately. "Ah," he said with dark delight. "You've finally noticed." "Yes, Luna, you're carrying something quite remarkable. A child conceived in life but gestated in death, fed on silver fire and supernatural rage. Do you have any idea what kind of power such a creature will possess when it's born?" Luna's form blazed with protective fury. "You will not touch this child." "I won't have to," Silas replied calmly. "The corruption is already complete. The child you carry will be born as something beyond werewolf, beyond human, beyond anything that's ever existed. It will consume its way out of your dying essence, and then it will consume everything else." The horrible truth of his words resonated through Luna's supernatural senses. She could feel the unborn child growing stronger, feeding on her silver fire, preparing to emerge into a world it would see only as fuel for its endless hunger. "Unless," Silas continued, "you allow me to extract both children now. Lydia can be harvested for the great working, and your unborn child can be contained before it becomes a threat to existence itself." "Never," Luna snarled, but even as she spoke, she could feel the unborn child stirring within her, responding to the sound of her voice with predatory interest. That was when the fortress began to shake. Dust fell from the ancient stone ceiling as a sound like thunder rolled across the mountains, but this wasn't natural thunder. This was the coordinated march of something vast and hostile approaching from the south. Silas smiled with genuine pleasure. "Ah, they're early. How delightfully efficient." "Who's early?" Marcus demanded, instinctively moving closer to Lydia's suspended form. "The Grand Alliance of Supernatural Hunters, of course," Silas replied as if it should be obvious. "Did you think our little operation here was limited to Salem? We've been in contact with hunting organizations across 3 continents. They're very interested in studying Luna's resurrection, in learning how to kill creatures that refuse to stay dead." The thunder grew louder, closer. Through the fortress windows, Luna could see lights moving up the mountain, hundreds of them, organized in military formations. "How many?" Elena asked grimly. 300 hunters from 12 different organizations, Silas said proudly. Vampire slayers from Romania, demon hunters from Spain, witch killers from Scotland. All armed with the latest innovations in supernatural warfare. All very eager to test their weapons against Luna's unique condition. Luna felt her pack's terror spike as they realized the scope of the trap. 300 hunters against 15 wolves, with Luna fading by the minute and both children in immediate danger. But underneath her fear, Luna felt something else stirring. The unborn child within her was responding to the approaching threat, its supernatural hunger awakening to the promise of so much potential food. "There is another option," Silas said conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than the imminent destruction of everything Luna held dear. "You could let the child be born naturally. Here. Now." A creature of pure supernatural hunger would make short work of 300 hunters. "And then it would consume everyone else," Luna said, her voice hollow with horror. "Including my pack. Including Lydia." "Yes," Silas agreed. "But they would die as fuel for something transcendent rather than mere casualties of war. Surely that's preferable?" The fortress shook again as the hunting army reached the outer walls. Luna could hear the sound of siege engines being assembled, smell the acrid tang of silver weapons being blessed and prepared. They had perhaps 10 minutes before the assault began. "Choose, Luna," Silas said urgently. "Serve as a battery for our great working and save both children, or let the creature within you be born and watch it devour everything you've ever loved. But choose quickly, because if you don't, the hunters will make the choice for you." Luna looked at Marcus, at her terrified daughter, at her loyal pack preparing to die defending creatures who might not be worth defending anymore. She felt the unborn child stirring within her, felt her own essence continuing to fade, felt the weight of decisions that would reshape the supernatural world. And outside the fortress walls, 300 hunters prepared to end the threat of Luna Blackwood once and for all. Chapter 8. The fortress walls exploded inward with the sound of divine judgment. Luna watched through the ritual chamber's windows as 300 supernatural hunters poured through the breach like a flood of silver and blessed steel. These weren't the corrupted humans she'd been hunting, these were professionals. Vampire lords from the old country moved with liquid grace, their pale forms untouched by mortal limitations. Demon hunters from the Spanish Inquisition chanted in languages that made reality itself recoil. Witch killers from the Scottish Highlands carried weapons that hummed with ancient power. And at their head, recognizable even at this distance, was Minister Blackthorn, no longer the terrified human she'd spared in Salem, but something transformed by months of consuming supernatural blood. His form blazed with stolen power as he directed the assault with military precision. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Silas said, his corrupted voice filled with genuine admiration. 3 centuries of supernatural hunting knowledge, unified under a single banner. They call themselves the Grand Alliance, and they have one simple goal: the complete extermination of supernatural creatures who refuse to serve human interests. Luna's fading form flickered with desperate fury. Her pack, her family, stood no chance against this army. Even if she still possessed her full resurrection power, even if she could command legions of spirits, the numbers were impossible. But the unborn child within her stirred with different calculations. It sensed the approaching hunters not as threats, but as fuel. 300 supernatural beings, their life forces enhanced and concentrated through their own dark rituals, a feast beyond imagining. "Let me be born," it whispered in her mind with a voice like silver breaking. "Let me feed on them all." "No," Luna said aloud, her hands moving protectively to her ethereal abdomen. "I won't unleash you on the world." "Then we all die here," Elena said grimly from the chamber entrance. She'd been listening to the approaching army, calculating odds with the cold precision of a career soldier. "Luna, I've seen what that thing inside you is capable of. If we're going to die anyway, at least let it take the hunters with us." "And then what?" Marcus demanded, still frozen beside Lydia's suspended form. "When it's finished with the hunters, when it's consumed every supernatural creature on this continent, what then?" "It won't stop, Elena. Creatures like that never stop." Luna could feel the truth of his words in her fading essence. The unborn child's hunger was absolute, endless, growing stronger with each moment it remained within her silver fire womb. If she allowed it to be born, it would indeed destroy the army, and then it would consume everything else. That was when Lydia spoke. "Mama," the 3-year-old said quietly, her voice cutting through the din of the approaching battle like a silver bell. Mama, is that really you? Luna's form blazed with desperate hope. Yes, baby. It's me. But Lydia wasn't looking at Luna's monstrous form. She was looking past it, through it, to something deeper, the fading echo of the woman who had sung lullabies and told bedtime stories and promised to always protect her little girl. You're hurt, Lydia observed with the simple clarity that only children possessed. The fire is hurting you. Luna felt tears she shouldn't be able to cry burning silver tracks down her ethereal cheeks. Yes, baby. The fire is hurting Mama. Then put it out, Lydia said matter-of-factly. When I get hurt, you always make it better. So make the fire better. The innocent wisdom of those words hit Luna like a physical blow. In all her calculations, all her supernatural scheming, all her pursuit of revenge and power, she'd forgotten the simplest truth of all. Sometimes the only way to win was to stop fighting. Marcus, Luna said quietly, her voice carrying absolute certainty for the first time since her resurrection. I need you to trust me one more time. Marcus met her silver flame gaze, seeing past the monster to the woman he'd loved for 15 years. Always. Take Lydia and get the pack out of here. There's a passage behind the ritual chamber that leads to the old mine shafts. Follow them north until you reach the Canadian wilderness. Luna, no, Elena said, understanding immediately. If you sacrifice yourself now, the hunters will just keep coming. They'll hunt us down one by one. Not if there's nothing left for them to hunt, Luna replied. She could feel the fortress shaking as the army reached the inner chambers, could hear the screams of Silas's remaining guards being overwhelmed by superior numbers. But first, I need you to do something for me, Elena. Luna reached out with her fading power, touching Elena's consciousness with ethereal fingers. The transfer was gentle but absolute, the unborn child, the creature of hunger and silver fire that had been growing within Luna's resurrected form, passed from mother to surrogate in a heartbeat. Elena gasped, her hands flying to her abdomen as she felt new life take root within her. But this wasn't the monstrous creature of pure hunger that had been feeding on Luna's vengeance. Filtered through Elena's living essence, tempered by a mother's willing sacrifice, the child became something else entirely. Something that carried Luna's power but Elena's humanity. She'll be born as she should have been, Luna said softly. A child of two mothers, carrying the strength of both. The ritual chamber's doors exploded inward as the first wave of hunters reached them. Blackthorn led the charge, his form blazing with stolen supernatural power, his weapons dripping with blessed silver. Luna Blackwood, he roared over the din of battle. By order of the Grand Alliance of Supernatural Hunters, you are commanded to surrender for immediate execution. Luna turned to face him, her form beginning to blaze with silver fire one final time. But this wasn't the cold flame of vengeance, this was the warm light of sacrifice, of love chosen over power, of protection offered freely rather than extracted through fear. Marcus, she said without taking her eyes off the approaching hunters, the chains. Marcus understood immediately. While Luna's blazing form drew every eye in the chamber, he reached for Lydia's bonds, and found them unlocked. Silas's trap had been disabled by Luna's sacrifice, by her choice to save rather than consume. As Marcus lifted their daughter from the ritual circle, Lydia reached out toward Luna's fading form. I love you, Mama, the little girl whispered. And I love you, baby, Luna replied, her voice growing fainter as her essence prepared for its final gift. Remember that. When you're old enough to understand what happened here, remember that everything I did was because I loved you. Lydia's small hand touched Luna's ethereal cheek, and in that moment of contact, something transferred between them, not power, not supernatural ability, but something infinitely more precious. The knowledge of what it truly meant to be Alpha. Go, Luna said to Marcus, to Elena, to her pack. Go now. As her family fled through the hidden passage, Luna turned to face 300 supernatural hunters with nothing but her fading power and her absolute determination to protect those she loved. You want to see what an alpha can do? She asked Blackthorn, her form beginning to collapse in on itself like a dying star. Let me show you. The silver fire that had sustained her resurrection, the power that had made her a creature between worlds, the rage and love and desperate hope that had brought her back from death, all of it began to burn away in a controlled implosion that would leave nothing behind but memory. But as it burned, it expanded outward in a shockwave of pure supernatural force. The hunters had perhaps 1 second to realize what was happening before Luna's final sacrifice consumed them all. 300 supernatural beings, their stolen power and dark knowledge, their weapons and their hatred, all of it vanished in silver fire that burned everything it touched and then burned itself away into nothingness. When the light faded, the fortress was gone. The army was gone. Silas and Blackthorn and their grand alliance were gone. And Luna Blackwood was gone. But in the Canadian wilderness, 15 wolves ran free under the light of the blood moon. And in Elena's womb, new life stirred, a child who would carry Luna's power but not her hunger, her strength but not her rage. 10 years later. The gravestone was simple granite, carved with words that had become legend among the supernatural communities of the New World. Luna Blackwood Alpha, Mother, Protector. She chose love over vengeance. Lydia knelt beside the grave, now 13 years old and beginning to show the first signs of her inherited power. Her amber eyes, Marcus's eyes, but with flecks of silver fire that belonged uniquely to her, gazed at her mother's memorial with the solemn wisdom of someone who had grown up knowing she carried both blessing and burden. Beside her, her younger sister stirred in Elena's arms. Born 3 months after the battle at the fortress, little Luna, named for the mother who had given her life, possessed eyes of pure gold that marked her as something unprecedented in werewolf history. A child born of sacrifice rather than passion, carrying the power of alpha bloodlines but tempered by love and loss. Tell me the story again, Lydia said quietly to Elena, who had become her stepmother in all but blood. Elena adjusted baby Luna in her arms and began the familiar tale. Your mother was hanged for being alpha, for refusing to hide what she was. But death couldn't hold her, because her love for her pack, for you, was stronger than any grave. And she came back, Lydia continued, the words as familiar as her own name. She came back, Elena agreed. But she chose to sacrifice herself rather than let vengeance consume her. She chose to protect those she loved rather than destroy those she hated. Lydia placed her hand on the gravestone, feeling the echo of power that still lingered there, not the silver fire of resurrection, but the warm strength of a mother's love. Thank you, she whispered, her own eyes beginning to glow with the golden light of true alpha power. Thank you for showing me that true strength isn't about revenge, it's about protecting those you love. The wind through the forest carried her words away like a prayer, and somewhere in the space between worlds, Luna Blackwood smiled and finally, truly, rested in peace. I know you enjoyed this video. Do well to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. I know you have suggestions and thoughts on this story. Do well to drop them in the comments section below. Also don't forget to share this video to family and friends.